Just wanted to welcome everybody to the kickoff of Propel Canada. This is an iPipeline, going to be an iPipeline annual institution now, and it's our chance to showcase a little bit of what we're doing, as well as line up with our WealthServe community and talk about things that we have going on there. But today is about the changing face of life insurance, and as I mentioned, this is one of 8 sessions that we're going to be running over the next 4 weeks, and we've got 2 tracks. The genesis of this or these presentations was really the WealthServe community and serving those. So we have a rich operational track for our WealthServe community and sessions named What's Stopping You, with a focus on investments and some things that we want to bring to the fore that you may not know about that can help you with your use of investments and optimize the use of that tool. We're having a session focused on data feeds called 3 Things to Feed Your Soul, which is going to be an interactive session that we're going to drive to help you get the best from the data feeds to and from WealthServe. So look forward to that. We have a focus on RepVision, our investments tool front end, with a similar theme. We believe there's lots of capabilities in there that folks maybe aren't making the best of, and we'd love to see you benefit from some of the development work done in the RepVision tool. So we can have a focus on that, one of the sessions. And we're also going to get an experience. Take some time to help you get to know the support team and the processes that we run behind the scenes on the WealthServe side. So a rich operational track. The times are and dates are there. If you want to go to Google and type Propel, iPipeline Propel Canada, you will find a way to register for any of these sessions. So just to let you know, it's that easy. There's a web page set up there where you can come and join us on any one of those sessions that you choose. On the strategic track, we have, apart from today's session, we have several sessions showcasing iPipeline capabilities. A session called Outside In, which is really a look at how our policy administration capability is actually set up in a way which actually empowers the consumer, the broker, distributors, as well as the carrier, to really some optimal outcomes, with some conversations about installations that we have in the UK that run about 40% of the protection market there, and some of the successes we've had there that we're now bringing over the Atlantic into North America. We have an industry panel where we're going to dig into all the things that have been happening to us lately and pondering whether they'll ever be the same and whether that's actually a bad thing or not. So going to have some fun with a group of 5 stakeholders from the industry, with different businesses serving different channels, and just getting their take on what's good, what's bad, what's changed, and what the future may look like. And then the alphabeti spaghetti at the end there, and the BI, ML, AI, and ETL is us turning a focus onto generating ROI, a return on investment from all these things, machine learning, business analytics, and how we move from just insights into action and actually drive some solid outcomes. So that's an interesting session with some real material and some real depth to it on actually how you turn data, into profit. So some sessions there. I hope you're interested in joining us on. Let's say it's as easy as going to Google, type in iPipeline Propel Canada. You'll find the page and be able to sign up for any of those sessions. So look forward to seeing you there. On to today's agenda, split into 3 parts today, with the keynote from our friend Mark Hardy from TD Insurance. Very pleased to have Mark join us today, and I will embarrass him further a little bit later on as I finish up the introductions and setting the scene, which is from me, Simon Tomlinson. I'm, for those that don't know, I'm the Managing Director of iPipeline Canada. I'm very pleased to be in this role, having steered Blue Sun, into new parentage at iPipeline. It's been a great journey, and it continues very strongly. Very excited about the future at iPipeline. And then to close us out at the end of the day is John, with some really, really great insights from the world of WealthServe and the business that we put through the platform there. some interesting insights of what we've seen during this COVID period, how it relates to volumes, products, and business types. And I will try not to steal his thunder so that he can enjoy the fruits of his labour. John has a real keen interest in BI and somewhat made a hobby of digging into what's going on and presenting it to us and extending our product set. So it's definitely got some good material at the end there. But wanted to jump in today onto the sort of the changing face of life insurance and reaching your customer digitally. I think, the reality is our industry is not necessarily the best at change, but I think we have some real driving forces making us change at the moment. We obviously have a virus running rampant at the moment, which is stopping us get together face to face, and is meaning that we're finding and having to find new ways to do business digitally and virtually, much like we are doing today. I think we'd have much preferred to have had this community of folks at a nice location, face to face, enjoying some time together. But way of the world now means that we've got to stay apart. We've got to find a way to carry these things off digitally. So we really have some strong drivers for change going on, and we really have the inexorable rise of digital ways to buy, as showcased by Amazon. I mean, I don't know anyone now that doesn't get 2 or 3 parcels a day to their house, it seems, at the moment. I know mine's like that. Seems like there's a revolving door of Amazon delivery folks coming, dropping stuff off for me, my kids, and my wife. So, and it's just the way that we shop now. And I think, for our industry to believe that we won't be in a rate compare and deliver scenario in the very near future, I think is naive. But the change has got me thinking about some of the Vogue things from management consultant in the late 90s, and Jim Collins' of Good to Great book fame, a book I think most people in industry found a way to read at some point. A great narrative on how the real barrier to becoming great is just being good enough, and I think our industry is very much like that. But Jim turned his mind to, okay, what actually affects change, and put a focus on, things called catalytic mechanisms, and how in business, we rarely do well unless we can generate one of these catalytic mechanisms. And I think the irony is with the onset of COVID, the rise of digitization, we're actually at one of those moments where we are going to change sort of inexorably from where we were. And just something I found fun as I went to the Harvard Business Review and read up more, about, what happens when driving change and when traditional management tries to drive change, how it's contrasted with something that actually genuinely affects change. And so they use that traditional management desire to change is generally understood merely as an intention in an organization, whereas a catalytic mechanism has a sharp set of teeth, meaning that if you don't react to it, you're going to get bitten and you're going to suffer. And you can kind of tell the difference between the two. And that, unfortunately, the hallmark of management change episodes, does often lead into short-lived or single event and episodic change that doesn't actually last. Whereas a catalytic mechanism, if effected properly, does produce an ongoing, long-running effect on the way that we operate. Another insight which I kind of liked was that traditional management concentrates on holding power and tries to force outcomes, and is maybe slower and resistant to seeing those power structures dissolve and actually lose control, whereas catalytic mechanisms blow those up, empower others, and are fast and really offer you no choice. And when you think about change in our industry, and what's happened with the onset of Uber and Lyft, you look at the taxi industry, really they're left with no choice other than to respond, because consumers just want their rides to be like that. And so, I thought that was fun. We're an industry where we are, I think, we've got a catalytic mechanism upon us. I think we're trying to manage our way through it, but I think it was interesting to me that with all of our desire to change and bring on e-apps and electronic ways of doing business, it's taken force change to actually change the face of life insurance and how it operates digitally. And just a little bit of a showcase of what we have coming in those strategic sessions is really a focus on the change, and how these catalytic changes are affecting the way that we look at lead and opportunity generation. I mean, we're looking at that in a very, very different light around the machine learning and analytics, and how we can, learn what customers like you might buy next and use that to generate leads. So there's some coverage of that. Talk about what being in front of your customers looks like now. We have some great examples in our own industry locally. Folks like Empire Life, I think pretty much everyone has an app now. But there are some clear winners and maybe sort of clear losers in that space when we look at results. Being in front of your customers, not just about offering them up an e-app, it's about collaborative methods. And so we'll be covering some of that, some strategic sessions. And as I said before, the customers' expectations that they can buy now, and the use of more advanced underwriting, the design of products to actually let that happen in a way similar to where expectation is in other digital mediums, is something that, again, iPipeline would love to talk to you about what we're doing in that domain. The efficiency of advisors and engagement of clients is something that we're looking at, and I've got it raining on a car there, because I think what we're seeing is advisors are becoming very, very capable of operating digitally. The profile of the products is changing, but the volumes are basically recovering, and they're doing that. I would argue with far less time being expended getting to and from clients, and so I think the way that we've helped advisors operate in that manner and the engagement of their own clients to force that communication is something, again, we'll be showcasing in strategic tracks. Another thing I know John and I talk about a lot is how technology helps enabling the transformation rather than driving it. I think we make technology and always hope it's going to ring the bell and drive change. Often we find that what we really are focused on is how we refine something and how technology helps a process that humans want to do, rather than just coming in something completely radical. And so there's some good stories there in our tracks about how we've enabled those transformations and started to use service as a differentiator. Really, in a world where we can't necessarily go and see our clients face to face, and we can't operate with them in a way that we may prefer or may choose, how do we use the episodes of communication and interact with them to differentiate our services, to help bring the client to what they may need, whether that's an upsell or downsell, or a cross sell, or really if it's just enabling them to actually look after themselves. And so these are all things in the tracks as we focus on some of the broader iPipeline tools that we're going to focus on. But it's just a good segue into introducing you to Mark Hardy, who's up next with our keynote today. If ever I've met a chap that really is interested in driving change with a passion for making sure consumers are looked after and really get to the coverage they need for themselves and for their lifestyles and protect their family, it's Mark. Mark exudes this. It's been a pleasure to actually work with Mark over the last few years because of that drive. And I think if anyone that we've worked with over the last few years is responsible for changing the face of life insurance, it's Mark. And so I'm very happy to hand over control to Mark now and let him chat to you about his initiatives and what he's been doing at TD, changing the face of life insurance. So Mark, I believe I have passed control to you, sir. So I'm hoping at the moment you'll be able to click through your own slides. Welcome and thanks for taking the time today, Mark.
No, thanks, Simon. So the technology was flawless, so your Zoom skills are top tier for sure. So no, that's great. Thanks, and I appreciate being here. So first, I'll just sort of changing face of life insurance. You notice first thing is the beard got much bigger than in the last picture. But it's also, I wanted to welcome everyone. I'm joining you from Stony Creek this morning in my dress shirt and jogging pants, as is appropriate for any Zoom meeting. And here to share a bit of background and insight on our business. But first, I'll start with myself. So Mark Hardy, I'm responsible for our direct life and health business at TD Insurance. And so a little bit different than most of the distribution in the Canadian marketplace, at least. And so TD is very focused on a direct-to-consumer model on both our home and auto, and in trying to bring that forward on the life and health side. What I will tell you is that while I joined TD Insurance about 4 years ago, this has been a story that's 20-something years in the making at TD. So TD Insurance has been in the life insurance space for a very long time, and has found ourselves at a nice moment in time where I think this is shaping up to become a bit of a shift for our industry. I would say, as I always have, that direct to consumer and the opportunity that we have here is really about, and sort of what Simon alluded to, was a passion for bringing more protection to more consumers. So how do we get that introductory level, that entry level, that first buyer of life insurance? And overwhelmingly what we've seen in our business has been that we've attracted that first time life insurance buyer who might be a little bit intimidated, but a big process. And we're really passionate about trying to find ways to get more Canadians access to that coverage in a quality way. And so we've made the decision some years ago to really lean in on digital. So we, from our insights on the home and auto business, knew that was coming to fruition there. And if we could put ourselves in a good position up front, that we would be there when the time came where we sort of saw that catalytic event, as Simon alluded to as well earlier. And so we really found ourselves in that space. But I wanted to walk through, a little bit about that's certainly the changing scope, and we've seen it for everyone, and we've seen the independent agents and career agents have all adapted to this environment as well. But wanted to more speak about a little bit on our story and how we got here, and some of the things that you may take that are helpful that are not necessarily specific to a direct-to-consumer model, but sort of anything as you're sort of thinking in this digital world about how you might want to approach problem solving. I'm sure many of them you've heard before in different consulting decks or in your own practices. I just wanted to bring to bear and show them how they worked for us at TD and how we were able to bring it forward. And so when you think about an opportunity like we had when we worked with iPipeline or Blue Sun at the time, was to bring technology to bear in a really short period, and being able to do that in a very large organization. So what I will say is we sort of signed our contract in September, and we were up and live the beginning of February the following year. So, exceptionally short timeline, especially when you consider the size and scope and processes that come with any large organization, let alone a large bank. And so really proud of our ability to do that work and get that into play. Ultimately, over a course of 12 to 18 months, we were able to bring on all of our new business and get up to 5 new products launched on the platform together in a collaborative way. And a lot of the learnings from that is also what I wanted to share today, and sort of some insights that you can use, hopefully in as you're addressing your new projects or opportunities that you might have. And so I'll start with, there we go. Just sort of our growth story and sort of where we focused on how we were going to actually build our business from a direct-to-consumer standpoint. And so the first point is simplified experiences for customers, and which is absolutely table stakes. You need to think about it that way, as how do you make something that's fit for purpose for what the customer wants. And so I'll give you sort of 2 examples on this. So one would be, a lot of times it's one where you want to either simplify the product or take features out. And in a lot of cases, that's not necessarily what you need to be doing. What you need to do is take those complexities and make them your problem, not your customer's problem. And so through our processes and what we've been building on is finding ways that can take the complexity away from the customer and bring it to us. And so you can do that from data, from how you design your processes and experiences, to moving things into your back office, as opposed to taking your problems and making them your customers. And that's really where a lot of the complexity comes from. I would also say the second piece of that, taking pieces where, we've got long-standing processes, questions that we ask, and really hammering away at each one of them and saying, is this absolutely necessary? How do I get myself into a better place from a customer experience standpoint by being able to extract any of those complexities? And then that'll tie into my third point. We'll come back to it. The second piece is continuous improvement. And so, while we did a lot of work with Blue Sun and iPipeline to get ourselves launched and ready, we had done a tremendous amount of pre-work to know that we were comfortable with where we were going to land. So, for example, the first version of our application that we used in digital was actually deployed into our phone channel. So our licensed advisors were using a version of the questionnaire and process with customers on the phone. And so from that, we were actually able to derive live feedback to say, okay, here's a question that seems to be causing challenges with customers. Let's change that. The order of this question isn't working. And even though we spent hours and hours and hours of time looking over the application process, you get so in depth into it that you miss some of the things that a new user will see. And so you've got to think about how you can actually design your processes and your interaction so that you can get that feedback and deliver continuous improvements in your process. So we were able to take that and then do a new version of the application in our digital environment, learn from that and bring it back to the phone. And so we sort of do this on an ongoing basis where we're making changes to our entire experience every several months. And so some of them are small, some of them are big, but I think finding a way that you can do that and a partner you can do that with is critical. So the last point is the first party data and insights. And so this is, you can think of this as being as complicated as, reams of data that you have available and you're doing all your analytics on, or as simple as actually getting on the phone or sitting and do some listening with your customers as they're going through a process to give you those insights about, okay, here's a place where myself as an expert, I understand what this means, but most non-insurance people won't understand it. So how do I reframe this? How do I make this work? And how can I then bring that forward to more customers? The other piece would be, as you go digital, there's a lot more data available. So where you may not see a hesitation in a customer because they're guided or because your distribution is focused on advisors and they're really doing a great job of absolving you of all of your process errors, when you get into a digital environment, that doesn't exist anymore. And so you really need to keep a keen eye on, where do people struggle with getting through your process? Where is the fall off? What do you ultimately see as an outcome? And really focus on using data as the canary, and then bringing your thought process and intelligence and your team and your advisors together to really figure out that, okay, I know what the problem is, now I need to know why. And that's where you bring those two pieces together, being able to bring it back to drive that continuous improvement, which ultimately then delivers that simplified experience for customers. And so by focusing on those three things is really how we've been able to do this. And it's been a journey, and it's sort of come together really well. I would tell you, it's over the last 4 years or so, we've grown 4x on the back end. So, nearing a 50% compound annual growth rate. So really significant outcome. Been really proud of the team and the work that we've been able to do here. And we see a lot more potential on the horizon. And so very excited about all of that, but I think it's been rooted in these three fundamental pieces on how we've been able to grow. Oh, one too many. There we go. So I will tell you from just from a key learning standpoint around how we were able to be successful. And so the very first piece, and to bring some embarrassment to John and Simon, I think that very first one is, we went out in a process of choosing partners, not vendors. And we've been very specific about, even when we speak with each other and internally, that the nomenclature we want to use is that iPipeline is a partner of our business. They're key to how we work. They're an extended element of TD Insurance. And so we really feel that way, and we try to bring that forward all the time. I think it really changes the dynamic, because you want to make sure that everyone's as invested in your business as you are. And I think we've done a fabulous job. I couldn't be more happy with working with John, Simon, and the whole team at Blue Sun, and now iPipeline. We've seen that continue throughout. And that's really, even the fundamentals around, here's where you should be spending your money, here's where you shouldn't, being open to challenge on things like, I don't understand why this is this cost. And John, well, no, that's sort of, and then where's the value from that? And how do we make sure that we're getting value for money? And they've always been fabulous partners in doing that. And that has made a huge difference in making sure that we're able to drive continuous improvements based on data, but that create value, right? So if you can do those other pieces, but if they don't create value at the end, you're not going to make forward progress. And so we've been able to do that by having a partner in this business. The second piece, and it's somewhat related, is making sure that you choose an irrefutable North Star that you're going to have guide all of your decisions. Not because you won't have hundreds of great ideas. There are more good things to do than there will ever be time to do. It's, what is the thing that you're going to pick as where you're headed? And so for us, it's always been on a customer service focus. So how can we deliver fabulous service experience to all of our customers? Because that's what they expect from our brand. And so we need to be able to deliver that. And this is a way, maybe there's some other opportunity that will deliver an internal efficiency and may even save me some money. But if it's between that and something that's going to be customer impacting, it's always going to be that customer impacting thing is going to come first. The other reason this is important, this is something you can share with your partner. So when I have a conversation with John or Simon, it's they'll know that my first number one priority is not the internal efficiency or the paperwork or whatever. It's how do we make this right for that customer, that set of customers. And it's crystal clear all the way through our team and our organization that that's where we want to be. Doesn't have to be the same thing for everyone. That's what we've picked because it fits with where we're leaning into and what we think our value proposition is. But just having that one to be able to go back and say no to other things, because otherwise it just becomes a bit of a free-for-all. It's hard to do everything. The next piece is sort of unbeholden yourself and your teams, and I mean that to norms and expectations around just because we've always done it this way. And I know that everybody has been saying this for years and years and years but that's the way we've always done it. And it always shocks me to find every couple of months, there's always something that comes up like, but that's how we do it today. And even amongst myself, like you will find yourself when you get into a rotation, like, oh, but we've had a lot of success doing it this way. And so how do you need to get yourself out of that so that your teams know how to get out of it? Because the world is changing so rapidly that those fundamental beliefs may not hold true anymore. And I think we've seen that through the last few months, and definitely that's a muscle you want to be able to flex and be able to do, and also hold yourself accountable to that. How do you pull yourself out of your preconceived notions on this? And then the fourth piece, and there's I think it's actually a Voltaire quote, so I won't, which is not really the point of it, but perfect is the enemy of good. And there was another one, which is actually software related, but Wikipedia said that the page references weren't very good, so I won't use the person's name. But the point being, especially in this environment with digital, you need to get it out and learn from it, because you in your world or in your little lab or whatever may believe a number of things are true. But when you actually release these things into the wild, you see that people who are using it use it in a totally different way. And so get it out, get good enough done. Yes, you're going to have problems. There will be errors. There will be things to clean up. I know we've had our share of things, but we made those things consciously knowing that we'd have to do them. And I'd much rather have tried something that was good, figured out that we had to clean something up afterwards, than have spent forever to do something that got me nowhere. And so that's sort of the trade-off you want to think about there. And that's been definitely part of our approach, is to get to good enough in this space. Okay. One more time. There we go. The next thing is just sort of as you think about customer experience in digital. And so for many of us who grew up in a world where advisors were the people delivering the experience, or your customer service team in the phone channel, this is a different environment when you're in digital, right? So what you need to know is that it has to be flawless. You can't have a broken digital process, because they will just stop and leave and go, and there's no one there to save them. And so this is where we talked about earlier, it needs to be in a position where it's actually simple and doing the job that needs to be done, and not taking your problems and making them your customers' problems, because what they will do with that is they will leave. And so and this is where the data comes in and everything else, to understand whether or not your digital experience is flawless. If you find that almost no one is making it through your 62-page form, it's not them, it's you. Oh, sorry, let's get that there. But so that would be number one. I'll go back one. Sorry, guys. There we go. Okay. Anyways, we'll just go back to this. So the second piece is around hypothesis testing. So if you think about this in a digital world, you may presuppose a number of things. You're not necessarily going to have the agents that used to be there to do it, but you actually get this new thing, which is very neat from a science perspective, which is hypothesis testing. So if you think something and someone else thinks something else, in a digital world, you have this wonderful thing where you can actually just go test and find out which one is going to work. And so that's where the science comes into this. So when you have a disagreement, and no longer has to be who has the louder voice or the bigger title or whatever, you can actually just go put it forward, test it out in a digital environment, and actually prove the point one way or another. And you really need to think about designing your processes not only in a way where you can have challenging viewpoints, but that you can then build your infrastructure in a way that you can test. So this is something we do all the time. And it can be something as simple as wording on a button or the entire experience, right? So where do you want to go? What information are you collecting? How do you word things? I will tell you for sure, simple things, even in our marketing message that we will tie down to the end of the application process. You change one word, it can make a 30 or 40% change through the rest of the process. And if you looked at that small change on paper, and all of the sophistication and thought process, lots of intelligent people in the market, you go, oh, okay, I can only make a minor difference. When you actually go and test it, it can be huge. And I will tell you, there have been a number of things where I was convinced that something would work wonderfully and it would have an absolutely significant impact, and it was nil to negative. Because, as you think about things as yourself, you are not representative of everyone. And when you're selling to everyone, you need to sort of take that in place. And digital is this wonderful place where you can actually do that. And this sort of bleeds into the last piece, which is design for your user, not you. My favorite euphemism for this was, we launched our digital experience. I personally spent a ton of time looking through the application questions. We simplified a ton of it. We took out language. And then I went through to apply for myself the day we launched, and I was struggling with some of the questions in that process, because you immediately put yourself into a different mindset when you are the insurer or the person running the agency or whatever your process is, where you still have your work mindset, not your I'm a person human mindset. And so you really need to find a way to bring that forward. And the best way is to, eat your own dog food or whatever your preferred approach is, but it's very easy for this to fall away. And that's where all the other elements, it will come to bear through what you see in your digital experience, what the pull-through rates are, how many people are using it, and how satisfied they are with it. But this is actually probably one of the hardest things to do. So, and even from a team perspective, how do you structure your team who is engaged in this in a way to do that? And how do you appoint someone as the champion of your customer experience? Find some structure where you can do this, where their job is to pretend to be the customer, but also invite into your team as diverse a group as you can, because whether this is insurance companies or distribution, they attract a certain kind of person, generally speaking. And so you don't want to only design for you're not designing insurance for insurance people. We're designing insurance for everyone. And so how do you find a way to do that? And you need to take a different mindset and have everyone engaged in your team on that. Go. All right. I'll spend 2 seconds on COVID stuff. So I think number one, for sure, what we've seen and what happened early on was a heightened demand and intent for life insurance as protection. I think we've seen this in lots of places. So less about some of the traditional pieces, definitely the I keep clicking around on things. I'm going to stop clicking just for the record. So the heightened demand and intent for life insurance as protection is pretty key. That came out of that. Lots of people have better understood now the value of life insurance where they may not have before. We especially saw it in some of the younger segments, and definitely with those first-time buyers who've been left without it. That has been a boon for us, but I think also will be over the long term a boon for all the entire industry and Canadians in general. Like, this is without a doubt a very important part of everyone's portfolio. I think one of the interesting things for us is, a couple of years back, we did some work with the University of Toronto. Some Rotman students came in, and we were trying to suss out, so why do some people buy life insurance and others don't? And one of the biggest things that came out of it were, we live a very privileged life here in Canada. And so there's a ton of optimism where it's I'm invincible, or, multiple generations of being in a very well position. And we saw a marked difference between those folks who had immigrated to Canada and would have had experiences with less favorable outcomes and their general optimism about the world versus, multi-generation Canadians. And that's something you see now. COVID has brought to bear that, maybe things aren't always going to be perfect all the time, and there are real risks in the world. And now I'm aware of this risk and I need to do something about that. The second piece is it certainly exposed soft spots in manual processes. So, even where we had gone through a fully digital piece, we picked things off that were still going to be manual, and we didn't have a process for some or a number of those where, how would this work if I couldn't have anybody in the office? And so we had to fix a bunch of those. I'm sure everyone did. But you also find out very quickly which ones are the most important ones you want to have a look at. So that prioritization will have come out of that, and that's something we're going to be able to look forward to have been working through now. And then my last piece on this is an accelerant across stakeholders. So, the heavily regulated industry, lots of different players in our space. And a lot of times we all have wanted to do different things, and the environment hasn't really let us to be able to do that. I think what we've seen is this has opened the eyes to a number of the regulatory frameworks around how we need to approach these things. What can we realistically do? How do we continue to advance the industry? And so that has been another positive outcome from it. So I think from a digital standpoint, the demand is there. Customers are out looking for this. They're getting information about it. Ultimately, they're going to purchase through what have you channel. I think the benefit to all of us is there is that level of interest in the category, and that can only help everyone. The prioritization around which digital spots you want to go after, because now you've seen how it works if it's got to be manual. And then certainly the things that have maybe held us back in the past around some of the other stakeholders, so regulatory bodies, et cetera, is no longer or lessened an issue. And I think we have really good arguments to be made with regulators as we go forward. And then my last piece, just a little bit of, so John had asked if I could look into the future a bit and what I saw in the future. And so what I will tell you is whatever I say will ultimately prove to be wrong in any great detail, other than these 3 points. And so number one is whether you're in digital and you're direct to consumer, or you're in the agency business or independent broker or in the wealth management space, absolutely number one, double underline, like this is a trust business. This will be a trust business forever and ever. This is someone exchanging money for a promise. That is not going to change. How do you facilitate that may change. How do you imbue trust amongst your customers may change, but the principle is the same. And so I think as long as we continue to focus on that element of trust, whether it's with your agents or consumers, or how do you continue to give value from that perspective, I think that is never going to change. The second piece, as a direct-to-consumer, digitally focused company, absolutely at the end, it is a human business. So if you think about you are dealing with customers who are people, how do you design things in a way that is meant for them as humans, not as robots? And like your brokers, if they're using an e-app, or any consumer who's engaging with a life insurance customer, they are still people, and need to design around thinking about them as people who aren't experts. They aren't proficient in this category. This isn't what they do for a living. They have no idea, but they want and value what we're providing. And so how do you build that trust and confidence with them as you work through all of your different processes and give them that as part of your exchange? And then the last piece, life insurance or any insurance category really has always and will forevermore be a data business. The which data, the how you get it, how you use it, how it facilitates may change, but you certainly, especially as a digital business, like the proliferation of the amount of data is only going to get that much larger. The bigger challenge is on picking which parts are meaningful and valuable to you and your organization, right? So collect all the data you want. If you don't use it, it doesn't matter. It's actually totally fine to say, look, these are the 8 or 10 things I think are going to be the most important. May prove to be wrong, but may also let you know much quicker which ones are valuable and move on to collecting the next piece. So I will, certainly for us, we collect a lot of data, don't use it, a bunch of it, because it has proven that it's not as important. And then how do you focus on the really important elements to drive that out? Lots of things that'll come on the horizon around underwriting and risk selection and that into the future. But think about it even from the point of saying, okay, I now know which customers interact with me more digitally versus on the phone versus through an agent or what have you. And I can actually understand the value of each particular consumer and how much I should be paying or spending on them for acquisition, et cetera. So those are sort of my predictions for the future, are that nothing will change. It will continue to be a trust business, a human business, and a data business. And the particulars of how that works will change constantly, but that's at the root of it at the end. So I do want to thank everyone for listening to me today, and Simon and John for inviting me to speak about our business and sort of how we're approaching digital. So thank you, everyone, and thank you both.
Mark, thank you so much for that extremely insightful information. I think one follow-up question, because you've sort of given a perfect segue into data and where I'm going to share some insights. And one question I have for you, because oftentimes data can sort of drive at inconsistencies in your perception, right? A perception tells you one thing, and then the reality of data may tell you something else. I'm wondering if there's any instances you could share that have sort of brought that to bear, that sort of resonate with you.
Yeah, for sure. So I think it's, and probably dozens of, like, I think one of them are, for sure for me, because I'll give you the best example. So forms, right? So if you want like a contact us form, and so we look at this and go, okay, I'm going to publish this form, and then you can provide me some pre-information so it's easier for me to make the call at the end. And so you will ask the your name, your address, and if you give me more information, then you'll tell me what you're interested in and what your issues are. And then you call us, and by the time we've gone through the phone call, you've actually forgotten what the reason was in the first place. And what we see from the data is lots of people don't actually complete the form because there's too many questions. They're like, I want you to call me. I don't want to go through this inquisition process beforehand. I have a problem. I'm clicking this because I need you to get in touch with me. So just think about I guess the word, and you use a lot in building, what's the job to be done? And don't add extra stuff in. Like, I think that's always, we look at things and say, okay, I could just add one more button or one more thing or one more feature. And this is where the worse is better piece. Worse is better doesn't mean that you do a poor job of it. It means you do less things and do them really well, and then find a way to get your customer quickly to that one place. And so I think that would be, if I think about what data will tell you, it's time and time again, is as we've added more stuff, we end up stripping it back all the time, because more is definitely not better. Feature-itis, if you prefer, in the software framework, is it never quite works out. And most importantly, like, this is the design for your user piece. A customer for us is likely to apply once. So we need to make a process that is built for someone who's going to use it one time. When I have an agent on the phone, or you have an advisor, and they're going to use your system 100 times a week, that's a different user, and you don't want to design the same thing for both of them. And so those would be the sort of insight. So I would say, when we try to use our customer process in for our agents, it doesn't work. And when you try to use your agent process for customers, it's not going to work. And that's for sure and data will tell you that same thing, because you'll see it in the efficiency and throughput.
Awesome. Appreciate it, Mark.
Thank you.
Yeah, thanks again for your thoughts and sharing and joining us today. So perfect segue into data. One of the highlights, I guess, really of my year is always sort of looking into the data, looking into the trends, seeing what's happened over the year. Like Simon said, it really is a passion of mine. Maybe to my own detriment at times. Can spend lots of long nights and evenings sort of drilling into this stuff. But wanted to sort of take the opportunity to share what's really been an interesting year in our industry. And we talked about how it's a catalytic mechanism and how it can force change. I think how it can augment the beliefs and the momentum around businesses as well, right? And sort of challenge those traditional ways of operating. And I think the data really shows that, I think, and I'll sort of highlight some conclusions at the end after I've gone through that. Simon, there's some remote control problems, so and I know Mark sort of struggled with it as well. I've got some transition, so if you could maybe drive for me, bud, and I'll ask you to advance.
Got it, John.
Thank you, sir. So to start off, I just wanted to go through some written business metrics, and the number one sort of metric that we watch as we're seeing a forward-looking path is what do volumes look like from an application perspective. It's an indicator of how the business is going. Is that volume continuing, and therefore is place business going to happen downstream? Because if we're not seeing sort of the funnel coming in from an application perspective, we're not going to see the outcome from a place business later on. And I know each and every one of your businesses see that as well. And I think, we did expect a drop this year. What we've seen is that we're only down about 4% year over year in the life and health space from what we saw in previous years in 2019. And I think, it's a real testament to how the industry has been able to respond in the face of a lot of challenges. But one of the interesting drivers, and I'm sure not unexpected, was the e-app adoption. And it was literally a week's time, and I'll show some metrics in a moment. It jumped 20 points of percentage. So the percentage of e-apps being submitted versus paper jumped almost 20 points in the period of week. And again, I'll show some of that information. If you want to jump to the next one, Simon. One of the other pieces, though, is as these changed, how did that affect the types of business being placed in terms of face amounts, premiums, product types? And what I'll tell you is we have seen an increase in the number of in the total face amount we've written or seen applied for, to this point in time over last year. And really, I'd say it's net even. But if you look at that in terms of the volume being down 4%, the overall, kind of per application face amount is actually rising. And I think there's a number of factors that you could attribute that to, whether that be a move to some of the change to underwriting guidelines, as well as some reduced medical requirements that play into that, as well as people in a lot of cases looking to maybe a shorter term type product as opposed to maybe a whole life that would drive premium and longer term. And so switching to the premium, we've definitely seen decreases in the total annual premium being written over this year. And again, we see that as very much attributable to the types of products that sort of transitioned to being sold through the pandemic and as people sort of moved into the remote selling model. The simplicity of some of those products made it much easier to do remotely, and was also a much easier relationship to build for these folks in selling those types of products in a world that was remote. They were learning these were some simpler products that could still get the consumer the protection they needed in a number of situations. But the average premium we're seeing sort of year over year has remained fairly consistent due to what we're seeing as sort of the response and recovery of a bunch of the market. And then I'm sure not surprising to anyone, medical requirements. We took a long look at this and how that has changed over the course of the year. And the percentage of applications that require any form of medical evidence has dropped by 9% year over year, significantly dropped. And I expect that sort of trend to go down even further in terms of that percentage. So we saw, somewhere in the neighborhood of 26 to 30% of applications previously, and that has dramatically decreased. And along with that, the number of medical requirements that are actually being ordered. So not only the percentage of applications that need it, but the number of situations when it's determined that an application does require it is much, much lower. And that helps to get the cases through the mill much quicker as well, right? As a bunch of the paras, for instance, sort of went away as things were being covered, and that represented significant delays. And so a lot of adjustments were made, and again, can sort of bear fruit through this data. So if you want to go to the next slide. So if we look quickly in terms of written volumes and what we're seeing over the years, the red line here, the solid red line represents what we see this year. The dotted red line is the previous year. And, not surprisingly, in that March period, you see a significant drop in that red line. But what you also see, the blue line, is the percentage of e-apps. And like I mentioned before, in that 1 week period, we saw it jump from 35 to 56% and even spiked, as high as 60 and a little bit higher in a couple of circumstances, which is really, really interesting. But there's a couple of areas that, sort of I want to also highlight that I think should be of interest to anyone, and I think show why thinking about the data and what you see in those trends is really important. And if you hit these highlighted points here, you'll see that as drops. And I'm, usually I would do this interactively and say, hey, what do people see here? And Simon's already advancing, so he gave away the thunder here. But these are all the public holidays that are existing. But there's one other interesting point in this that I sort of want to highlight. And Simon, if you want to click one more, not too far, there's a dip that has happened in historical years during this period, but it didn't happen this year. And Simon, if you want to advance one more, that's actually the Labor Day holiday in Canada. And so what's interesting to me is we see that dip happening in prior years, but something different happened in 2020. And I don't have an answer for why, but these are some of those areas that can sort of drill into and try to understand what's different this year that changed from previous years. And again, just sort of challenging ourselves and challenging the thinking and addressing some of these gaps can really start to drive a lot of change in your organization. So maybe if we go to the next slide, Simon. I want to talk a little bit about the volume of products we see. So how does the product mix change sort of over this COVID period in the pandemic? And what you're seeing here is what's called a ribbon chart. It's showing sort of the percentage month over month, but the ribbons also move up and down as a share, right? So you'll see term, always the largest percentage of business being written. Over that March period, right, you see February to March, it went from 56 to 60% and it sort of bottomed out at around the 56 mark as an average overall. So definitely incremented in terms of the volume of term being written in that period as people transitioned to that remote selling, understood the digital applications. And in many cases, the term business is very heavily e-application based as opposed to something like a UL. And then in that same period, whole life UL decreased as well. CI/DI did see a fall, but what we also saw was a significant increase in CI, relatively speaking, and actually surpassed DI. So that's some of the trending you'll see as we go through this. But relatively speaking, there hasn't been a huge change in the mix that's being sold out there, which is sort of an interesting trend. And I do want to share for everyone that we will include this presentation for everyone to see after. To the extent I'm running through this too quickly for you. Simon, if you want to go to the next one. Similarly, if we look at for those products in terms of face amount and premiums, just sort of the changes, obviously through that March, April, we saw declines in overall face amount, but even more severely in those premiums as people sort of economically needed to manage their budgets and be careful. So shorter term products, lower premiums, but in some cases, you'll see as it sort of recovered, we're getting into some higher face amounts over those shorter terms. So sort of some interesting trends that can be pulled out of that. If you want to go to the next one, Simon. Written business is important, but place business is what actually drives, our financials and your financials more importantly. So when we look at volumes of place business, we're seeing that drop about 2% year over year. So very much in line with the 4% drop and nice to see it's actually it's declining at a slightly smaller rate than what we're seeing in the written business. And the face amounts are actually up across the board in terms of what's being placed, which is great to see. Both from a total and an overall average of those. Similar to what we saw in written, annual premium is decreasing, but the average is increasing slightly, albeit pretty immaterially. And then finally, excuse me, and interestingly, placement times and time to place significantly decreased over this period. And the next slide will sort of show some of the details of that. But the placement ratios for that is significantly increased as well, which I think is a great story for you folks and your organizations in the distribution space, because it means hopefully less wasted effort and deploying those efforts to places that actually make a difference. So Simon, if you want to go to the next one. So if we look at the place business trends, the blue line here again is representing what has been placed so far in 2020, with the dotted line representing the previous year. And I've included the yellow, which is the written, just so you can see the correlation between written and placed there and understand. So if you look at this, you'll see that there's some gaps starting to build up through that March timeframe, and it's actually decreasing at a larger rate. At a large rate, but it sort of recovered in that June timeframe, but then took another downswing sort of post that June timeframe. So we started sort of seeing two swings happening through the period that have sort of driven different levels of placement. But again, we're seeing again a recovery back. But I think over the coming months, what I'm expecting to see is this to continually sort of go up and down as the country and our economy and individuals sort of deal with what's going on around them. Time if you want to go to the next one. And then finally, in terms of time to place, here's some of the trends that, again, I spoke to earlier about what we're seeing. So in the January timeframe, it was around the 40-day mark, February, March, April, slowly sort of going up, but not significantly. But you can see those big drops in May and June and July, where that was really about where the medical requirements and allowing a lot of things to happen digitally as well, where, a physical signature was being required historically that could introduce a lot of delays. A lot of those sort of required pieces in terms of the process from getting to written to settled really got relaxed. And I think those are some of the changes that everyone's hoping to see, because that allows that business to get through the mill even quicker. So what does this all tell us? A lot of data. I'm going through it really quickly. I think the number one thing it tells us is how resilient our industry has been. The ability to change those catalytic mechanisms. Necessity is the mother of all invention. And what we've seen is that necessity is really driven and shown that we can be resilient and we can respond to these situations and we can continue to operate. It's not without its impacts, whether that be having to delay some of your strategic initiatives. We're very much the same. But what we know is we can continue to operate in the face of some of these challenges. And I think, this has been an exemplar of that. We're also seeing, obviously, in that vein, what can be sold will be sold. And, in the face of that change, when people couldn't be face-to-face, they couldn't do as many paper applications, or they needed to drop those applications on someone's doorstep in a plastic bag for them to later sign and put back on the doorstep to be picked up. That can happen, and people will find ways. And it's also really driven the electronic adoption. Excuse me. And I think, like Simon said before, it was that catalytic mechanism that really drove that adoption, right? Everyone rushed to get an e-application out, or the majority of them, but it wasn't until that need was really forced on people and it was necessitated really to continue to operate that we really saw that change in leaps and bounds. We did obviously see some general trends through 2020 with some marginally higher face amounts and lower premiums. And we believe that much of that is driven by the economic certainty or reduction in economic certainty that we've seen over the period. And I think we've seen and sort of shown the placement times being significantly reduced and driving increased placement ratios. Again, great stories. I think the question will be what will continue to last and what will continue, sort of post-pandemic, if there is a post, or in the face of these changes, will these changes remain? And I guess as a sort of final thought, I want to encourage everyone here to join us for a session we're having on December 1st, which is really going to highlight how this data can be turned not just from insight, but into action. And Simon mentioned the jargon that is out there in the industry, and really what we want to drive at is how you can take this data and turn it into actually action and drive results. So with that, Simon, I guess I'll pass it over to you for some closing comments.
Well, thanks, John. I think that brings us almost immaculately to the top of the hour again, so well done. I want to thank everybody for the time and attention. I know it's hard to sit down for an hour at a time. I know I find it hard to do that, and hopefully there's some value there. Hopefully we'll see you at some of the other sessions. I do want to finish with a quick poll that I want to send out, and just get your answers so we can see if you want to talk to us. So I will leave that on the screen, but I think everybody's free to go. But thank you for your time today. Look forward to the poll results and hopefully see you at some of the other sessions. Thanks so much for the time and attention, guys, and hopefully speak to you all soon.
Thanks, everyone.